There is a primal scream rising on this planet, and as many would argue, from this planet. Think of it as a boiling point of pain and disconnection, a culmination of disappointment, if you will, that we are unwilling, or even more concerning, that we are incapable of closing the gap between knowing better and doing better. In my work with young people, I hear a common refrain: I'm not suicidal, but I'm not sure I want to be here anymore. This is a clarion call that something's got to give. The New York Times refers to this slow death of the human condition as a pandemic of loneliness. Mental health practitioners refer to it as a crisis of global proportions, leading to ever-increasing rates of suicide, self-harm, addictions of all sorts, violence against others, and a population increasingly dependent on mood-stabilizing drugs just to function. Bottom line, we are struggling to exist in a world our nervous systems were not designed for. To exist in a perpetual state of fight or flight is the greatest theft of our human experience. We're being robbed of our potential to live a life of peace and harmony. Is there a way out of this path of self-annihilation and mutual destruction? I believe there is. My hypothesis is that if we are willing to go to school on our wounding, to remove shame and blame from our past, to find grace in all that has come before, and with even greater courage apply a lens of love to the present moment, our future can be radically and beautifully different from our past. Our failure to learn from our past forever binds us to the suffering of our ancestors. Our inability to meet this pain with compassion and wisdom is a key point of frustration for many. That frustration is the catalyst for this podcast. The Primal Scream podcast is an ongoing conversation with ordinary folks who have met their primal scream head-on and turned it into a powerful catalyst for change in their lives. They've stepped away from the performative expectations placed on them by their family and/or society, despite encountering resistance from within and external constraints along the way, leaving behind both the trauma of their story and the trauma drama that often ensues. Change is hard, but as these beautiful humans share their stories, we learn the intimacy of change is the opening to a life well lived. If you are feeling the existential dread of being alive on the planet at this time, you are not alone. If you're exhausted by the simple act of just being here, you are not alone. As you listen to these storytellers reveal their raw and real journeys to wholeness, it is our hope that you will find courage to do the same. Is there one message to take away from each of these podcasts? I believe there is, and it is simply this: you are not crazy, and you are not alone. Hi, welcome back to the Primal Scream podcast. Edie Osborne here, and my dear friend Courtney Adair is joining us today, having just finished birthing her dissertation. And so I'm sure there's a rich answer in this first question I'm going to put to you that can span quite an experiential realm for you. What does the term primal scream mean to you?
I'm going to start with what it feels like.
Okay, good.
Yeah, because it's been bubbling, and it's reaching the pressurized point, and I'm wanting to be in relationship with this moment of primal scream in a different way than I have in the past.
Wow.
I just had someone refer to me as a volcano, which I love. It's also shown up in like literature for me recently. And when I was just in Guatemala, like we're surrounded by volcanoes, that we had an earthquake, it was a whole thing. So I'm really like working with the volcano imagery right now. And so this primal scream feels like intense pressure in my throat. Like there's a steel gate that needs to be released and opened, and it's scary. Like I'm getting nervous energy in my body right now. Like, it is so powerful. And I understand why in the past I was afraid of it and other people were afraid of it. And now I am like, what do you need? Like, what truth needs to be hollered by releasing this? Yeah. And so it's like this energy of like up and out, and it's so grounded at the same time. So I think of that volcano with like this wide base, like coming up from Mother, and just this like hot lava that wants, oh yeah, I don't want to keep it inside.
I,
So that's what it's feeling like.
That is a perfect opening in metaphorical terms, and also for this moment of conversation between us. I loved what you just said, and I want to tease it out a little bit more so that it can be present in this moment. How you regarded Primal Scream in the past versus now, because I think that, as you know, these conversations that I'm curating here are designed to give others the courage to allow that big movement of energy and expression and truth of who we are. And I too can relate to, I was afraid when I first felt that it is a volcanic, eruptive, overwhelming, you think you're going to drown in it sensation. Yeah. And yet when it is allowed to release, there is such a shift on the other side. And now I'm hearing in your languaging a shift from then and now as well. So unpack that a little bit, please.
Yeah. So I'm going to paraphrase Elizabeth here, who I know you just had a conversation.
Also a podcast interviewee in one of the other episodes. Yes.
Yeah. So Elizabeth has written me a couple of letters on my path to becoming a therapist, because she's a few steps ahead of me on that path. And I've used these letters as like wisdom guides. And I really trust in them, and I trust in her so deeply and explicitly. And so I'll paraphrase something that she wrote in her last letter, which she actually gave to me on your land, by the way. So yep. I read it in Hope Temple.
Beautiful.
She said, when a woman's power isn't honored, she begins to learn to fear herself. Yeah. And so in the past, I was like testing out if this lava could land anywhere. And the world said, don't you dare. Like, you need to serve us in this way. Like, don't you dare. And so that pressurized feeling, it was like, nope, not allowed. Right. And that looked like serving others before myself and my own vision. And not just like, oh, I'll put you first and then I'll get to mine. It's like, no, I'm going to invest so deeply in what other people want that this is just going to fall by the wayside. Yeah. It looked like escaping myself through substances. So drinking myself numb, absolutely. And it looked like making my body as small as possible. Yeah. Those are the ways that primal scream wanted to come out, and I said, and I silenced it, and it was silenced, right? So that was then, and this is now.
Say that I get these. I love your language; it's so good, and it's just so many ways. Appreciate your art history. And as you paint the picture, I saw you go to a very young place, as you described. No room for this, the confinement. And it takes me to that place, and that little girl in me too, that had that big scream about, this is not okay. None of this is okay. Grown-ups, wake up. None of this is okay. Right? This is like a knowing so early in my evolution as a soul that not just my parents, but the world around me was not okay. This was not how it was supposed to be. And yet, being so disempowered in my own voice to even allow it for myself. And that quote, say the words again, that Elizabeth shared with you, that
when power is not honored in a woman, she learns to fear
she
herself.
learns to fear herself. And I do believe that so much of our feminine rising movement is overcoming the mother wound, the sister wound, the fear of the feminine. We just have this innate, and maybe innate isn't even the right, this conditioned orientation
Yes,
to the
exactly.
voluminous, voluptuous sound and beauty that
Yep.
is the feminine voice. So
Mm-hmm.
young place to now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've been, so my therapist that I see personally, she's a combination of, she uses somatics and IFS, internal family systems. So when you say like, oh, this young place, I'm like 100%. And she is like sitting right here next to me. And so what I've been working with is like, how can I give her voice, but allow that voice to happen in a container where she's feeling held, because it can't be so like flooding and overwhelming. And who is that going to serve? You know, if the primal scream takes us to this place that doesn't feel safe, like, no, like she already knows lack of safety. And she spent all of these years learning how to protect herself from herself and from others.
Looking for co-regulation, not dysregulation, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so it's been this process of like, who am I going to co-regulate with? And it's my like capital S self. Like it's my connection to spirit. You know, it's like the greater feminine. That's the container that I want to birth her into again, so that she gets to say, no, this isn't right. This is not right. And she gets to say it really grounded and know that it's her truth, you know, because for me, like also some of the past primal scream has looked a lot like this, like, how dare you? And it's really like, and it's sharp and I've been told it's spicy, and that's great. That's great. That's one version of it. But what happens for me is that can be received defensively, and I want to be heard. And so I'm working with delivering my primal scream, like from this, like, here is what I'm offering. Like, can we hold this together? Like, can you meet me here? Because like, I'm not perfect, you know? So like, can we hold this together? So that's a little bit of like how I'm trying to work with that younger part.
I'm going to, again, I love these. I'm going to pull on this little thread because I think this is true for so many women. I was in therapy with my ex-husband every week for 12 years. So there were a lot
of... Okay. There we
every
go.
week for 12 years on Wednesday afternoon, we would come from our different, we had a nanny who took care of the kids that afternoon, and we would meet. And this is where it was a volcanic migration to get to those sessions. And I would sometimes hold for that moment when we could be with a mediator, because I often felt unheard, unseen, and also dysregulated to the point where what came out of me wasn't always my most articulate self. And one time I remember my ex-husband saying, "Oh God, she's on her period. You really don't want to let her have her day today." And now I look back, and I realize what a patriarchal, misogynistic, gaslighting moment that was for me. And my therapist, a man, bless his heart, very evolved, looked at my ex-husband and said, "You know, it may come out more inarticulate and more raw when she's in this time of her month, but it doesn't make it any less valid or accurate, and in fact, thank goodness she has this hormonal escape valve once a month,
Mhm.
or she might never be able to allow this beauty, this voice to come forward. And I think that's part of the crone thing. I'm digging my gray. I'm loving my gray. I'm loving the crone phase of my life because I don't have the hormonal um movements
I see.
like I did when I was younger. And it's like I'm just present to all of it all the time now. And I have a little more
Mhm.
room to sort of sit in the poetry of my truth and offer it in more um as you say, offer it in ways that don't have to come out with so much anger and resentment and vitriol in the mix. This is just boundary truth. This is where I am now. Um,
Yeah.
and it's a different expression. And I wish
Mm.
I'd had the I wish I'd had a me in my life this age when I was younger who could have helped me navigate that, co-regulate that much sooner, but
Mhm.
I'm grateful for it now. So so here we are
Yes.
now, and a primal scream wants to you like the energy's right there right now. You've been in this
Yeah.
program for 4 years, right?
3
3
years.
years, intensive,
Yeah.
changed your whole life
Mhm.
completely. So so
Yeah.
that I know there's a primal scream opening in Guatemala, and now there's a
Mhm.
primal scream on this end. I feel like there's almost a cocoonish metamorphosis. Um, play with that a little bit.
Yeah, it almost, well, like time isn't
Right.
linear, you know? And so it almost feels like that scream that was starting to like rumble in Guatemala is actually like, okay, I'm here now. What are you gonna do? And, something that we talked about earlier was like how important space is when you are in transition and you're getting ready to take a leap into the unknown, like allowing for there to be some space so you can cultivate like what comes next. And I have not been doing that whatsoever at all. And so now I'm feeling this like I don't know what I want, but I'm so busy running after what I had planned that like I don't really have time to dream and to like settle and for it just to. So that is how that primal scream that started rumbling in January is now like really coming to the surface. And I hadn't listened to some of my own like deeply learned lessons of like give yourself time and space. And so now I'm gonna have to do the thing that younger me is so afraid of, and I'm gonna have to start saying no.
Oh, say more about that.
So my nervous system is patterned after generations of domestic violence. So, so my nervous system is wired in a way that is, I've kept myself safe from perfectionism, caretaking, peacekeeping, like being so hyper attuned to everyone else's energies. And so I call that like the wisdom of my wound. That's my survival strategy to use Stacey Haynes' language. And in a lot of ways it's really served me. Like I'm really successful. I've been able to do lots of different things in my life so far really successfully. And at some point, like if it's not a choice and that survival mechanism is just leading the show, then I am showing up again for like everyone
Right.
else. I'm doing that people pleasing. Like, oh, here's how I stay in the group. It's like I'm of service. I'm easy to be around. Courtney can be depended on. So I love these parts of myself. And if I'm not included in that mix of like who's getting taken care of and loved
Right.
on, um, then there's not a lot of time left for me. And so I have so many beautiful commitments this summer, and I'm gonna have to learn like where I can take a step back and trust that other people are gonna fill in Yeah.
I want to
Yeah.
punctuate this. This is so important. This work, this arc of truth that we're all walking in our own lives, and then also collectively, that there is and so many people say, I feel so alone, so isolated, but I also am so grateful that I don't have so many commitments.
Mhm.
There's a recalibration that takes place in our nervous system as we become more and more aware of our patterns and behaviors and
Mhm.
self-betrayals along the way, right?
Yeah.
All the ways that we said yes to go along, to get along. And also because we
Yes.
love doing things with people. And
Yeah.
it's,
Yes.
and not a but, and there is this awareness that I came into in myself that, oh my goodness, my nervous system requires a lot of self maintenance, a lot of care,
Mhm.
a lot of tending in a way that and if I do not do that, then I have nothing to give to anybody else.
Yeah.
All I had to give before was this codependent, I'll do this and you'll love me. I'll do this and I'll be safe. I'll do this and I'll fit in, and I'll do this and I'll have a safety net of humans around me. But in reality, I didn't have any of those things. It was I
Mhm.
call it sticky love, like, oh, I love you, but it was a fawning behavior instead
Mhm.
of fight, flight, freeze. There's the fawning. I became an expert
Yeah.
fawner, taking
Yeah.
care of everybody else and lifting them up, but realizing in this arc of my own journey home to self, um, man, it is full-time work for me to remember that my nervous system is the governor of truth in my life. And if I do not pay attention to that, I have no buffer zone of numbness left anymore.
Yes.
like I used to be able to stay numb for long periods of time and get through shit and then,
Yeah.
crash on the other end and be exhausted and resentful and martyred and all the things, and it was all self-betrayal. I just didn't understand it. But now I realize I am only good for other people when I am also good for myself first, right?
Mhm.
This is and the feminine, oh, this is such hard work for us because we have been conditioned from the get-go to be in service um, to the masculine, but also to the feminine, like to other women.
Mhm.
It's very complex. I think men are going through it in a different sort of way right now around career and structure and where they can set boundaries for themselves. So this is not a feminine only issue. I see it in men as well. But the nervous system is the key.
Yeah. And exactly what you're saying of like it's not like particular to the masculine or the feminine because we're all existing in a patriarchal
Right.
society. And that hurts
Yeah.
everyone, to different degrees and in different ways, absolutely. But like our systems aren't set up in a way for us to tend to our nervous
Not at all.
systems.
Not at all.
Yeah. And even what I'm seeing now with more like pop psychology around what is a nervous system and like how is this impacting us? I'm even seeing the patriarchal capitalistic ways of like, here's how you biohack the system, right? And I'm like, yes,
Yeah,
and
and
yes, and
optimize for sure, but not override it. Here, these are just more sophisticated ways of overriding our own internal
yes,
wisdom,
yeah,
and it doesn't serve us.
yeah, and that's So right after I finished giving birth to the thesis, it was maybe 4 days until I noticed my mind went immediately to, holy shit, how am I going to make
Yeah.
money? Right? Because I'm like ending school and I have a lot of dance stuff over the summer, which will be great. But then I have to figure out how I'm going to survive as a therapist. And so it was fascinating for me to go from my full-time job was learning how to show up compassionately and be of service in the world. Like my program's all about like training incredible bodhisattvas. Um, And so as soon as I was done with like this like masterpiece as how I was relating to the thesis, immediately my mind went like, gotta keep yourself safe. How are we gonna keep the lights on? Like go, 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 go. And that was where that primal scream started to really get pressurized, because all I wanted was to recover. Like I just wanted to sleep and to read books and to lay outside in the sunshine and to dream and search the internet for social justice private practices. But it was like, you need to hit the ground running.
So, well,
And
fear
so,
just rushed right in, right? Didn't even give you a chance to
yeah,
celebrate and marinate
right.
in the beauty of the works that you've been doing intensively
Yeah.
for 3 years. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's how like literally those patriarchal and capitalistic systems we were just talking about, like that is literally how I'm interacting with them right now. And how I feel in my
It
body.
reminds me of, the thing, we don't give mothers or fathers enough parental leave after they give birth to a child. And women at 6 weeks are supposed to go back to work and hand their babies off to a daycare person, or if they're lucky enough, a family member, somebody that they trust implicitly. We're not wired for that kind of release, give birth to something and then be done with it. Like that was a patriarchal overstep. Like my mother would tell the story of my father after she gave birth. He'd say, screw the doctors, you're mine. And 2 days after the baby's born, he's back at it, trying to have sex with her. And those things are just baked into our systems now, to the degree that we don't ever have rituals. We don't ever have initiatory practices that hold space for the big life moments at all. We get back on the merry-go-round and start, the treadmill, and start running again. So how are you going to tend that? What's your internal process right now around that? Because this can be really helpful for a lot of other people who find themselves on that same edge of, but if I don't have a plan, if I don't have a landing pad, I'm not safe. Instead of finding the safety from within, they're still depending on it to be an external safety net. So to that.
So okay, so I've been playing with this idea behind closed doors, but I'm just going to speak to it now because why
Full
not?
disclosures here. I love it.
Yeah. So the two like stereotypical times in a woman's life where she can ask for gifts that are not on her birthday or on her wedding day or for like a baby shower. Right. These are when women are allowed to
a little bit
ask.
of initiatory ritual. We do still allow that a little bit. Yes.
So I'm not having bio children. I don't know if I'm going to get married. And so I'm putting together my graduation wish list.
I love it. I love it. I love it. This is instead of a shower or a wedding gift registry, we have Courtney's life registry.
Yeah. And so I'm putting things on there like I really wanted a record player, and that's just one of those things where like I haven't set aside the funds to buy it for myself. I'm also putting things on there like there's so many phenomenal trainings and they're so expensive, but so help sponsor me in my next somatic training or my next social justice work, or like help me out with my student loans. So part of how I'm tending to this is like I'm trying to trust that the work I'm doing hasn't been alone and it hasn't just been for myself. And my intention with going down this route has been to be of service to my community and to everyone I come into contact with. And so it's a little bit of like, hey, who's got my back?
I was just thinking, it's like the ultimate GoFundMe.
Yes.
Fund me, please. Help fund me. Help me fund the next chapter of my life so that I don't have to. I know, I'm sure you've been living on a dime and a shoestring for the last 3 years. No room for any self-indulgence there. Kidding, especially when you're living on borrowed money. It's and now you're looking at all those student loans and thinking, oh my gosh, now I have this big burden that I have to release. Man, I'll tell you the new story. When we birth this new story, it is going to include education as a free component for life. We want people to go to school. We want people to learn and explore, and like every 5 years ask themselves, am I still loving what I'm doing? And if not, where does my spirit want to take me next? Like, we could do no greater service to the human condition than to make education as free as the air that we breathe, because that's how we thrive as humans, to continue to grow and learn. So I love your plan. All right, so that's part one of the plan. And I'm wondering, I had a similar moment when I left behind my big career, the speaker trainer on the road, and top of my game, world thought leader in my little body of work around dashboarding, and I was walking away from a very lucrative lifestyle, and I was doing it 10 years earlier than our retirement projections had allowed for. And I remember the financial planner sitting me down a few years, like 3 years into my, I'm done 10 years early. And he said, are you really done? Because if you're really done, we're going to have to relook at your numbers, because your retirement plan, you're not funding it anymore. And he says, I've got you living to 95, and you were going to make this amount, and here's your Social Security. And I said, and he says, and you got quite a shortfall having retired sooner than. And I thought about it, and I said, how long do you have me living for? And he said 95. And they said, what happens if you back the whole thing down to 85? And he goes, nobody's ever asked me to lower their death threshold. And I didn't do it for shits and grins. Just tell me what the numbers would look like if I don't have to live till 95. And I'm thinking climate change and shitty health care. My family's lived above 84, so 85 feels like a bonus to me, right? And he came back and goes, all right. Here's the deal. If you don't live past 85, you're fine. And I said, so what you're telling me is that at this stage in my life, I have the freedom and the flexibility to explore a new chapter without worry. And if I do need to worry, I'll worry when I'm 85 and not now. And I said, I don't really want to die having left anything on the table. I want to optimize the resources I have now while I'm still young enough and still vital enough to play in this field. And he laughed, and we just had lunch a couple weeks ago, and he goes, well, here we are. You made it to 65, and at 55, you quit working, and how is it going? And I said, it's great. It's great. You know, we don't have to follow the formulas that fear-based constructs impose on us. You know, a lot of people are realizing they're never going to own property by themselves. So co-housing is rising up. They're never going to raise their families by themselves. So co-family housing is coming to the fore. And, you know, I just think we need to be a lot more imaginative and creative about our construct solutions than we've ever been before. So I kept hearing, I am abundance. And as long as I remain an abundant whole human, I'll figure it out. I'm smart. I have lots of good people around me. We'll figure this out.
Yeah, I mean, one of the benefits of getting older, right, is being like, well, I've made it this far. Like, that wasn't, so maybe I can trust a little bit.
And I know you're not at my age. You don't have all of that war chest built up for you to relax a little bit. And I offer you in this moment, as you're dreaming into the next chapter for yourself, to allow yourself to let that dream have wings. Don't feel clipped by the existing rules and structure. So what happens next? How are you going to scream this one out?
I've been asking myself the same thing, actually. Well, something I've been doing for the last couple of weeks is I've made a choice to get sober. Yeah. So I've been tending to my nervous system so that when the scream is ready, like I haven't been numbing out.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'm a little bit more in tune to like when this needs to happen, like I'm here for it. And so that feels like planting some of those seeds, right? And then, yeah, it's a great question. I don't know.
As you were saying just a moment ago about going sober and not numbing out and being ready for how it wants to release whatever that is, it occurred to me, I call it the roundup of self, and with IFS in your background, I know you'll recognize this idea that we have all of these bits of ourselves that fractured off along the way. The 2-year-old, the 3-year-old, the 5-year-old, the 8-year-old, the 12, the 13, the 23-year-old. I found her recently, buried in diapers and depressed and sad and, just completely numbed out by life. And because I wasn't warm in alcohol, I had the sober thing, but I had food as my numbing device, right? And so I just want to talk about those numbing devices because they can look they're high reward numbing devices and low reward. And some people think, well, I'm not an addict. I'm functional. I work 90 hours a week. I'm great. No, your numbing is your work. There's the ones that society rewards. And socially, alcohol is rewarded for sure. But meth addicts don't get praised in social settings. Yeah. So, we have low functioning, high functioning, but really not high functioning, just high reward through societal constructs. We all have numbing behaviors. And it's the more I've leaned into this last few years has been a roundup of all my parts. I had a 5-year-old come back in a couple of years ago and I'd forgotten all about her. She actually tried to commit suicide by taking a bottle of pills. I mean, at 5, right? And I was very conscious of what I was trying to do in that moment. And so she hadn't ever been witnessed. She was like this silent little creature in there. She was so desperate. And so as each of those, the scream has gotten softer. It's like the scream is as the invitation for the roundup of all your parts to bring them all in. And one by one, they's like, no, she is safe now. She doesn't slow down and take time. And she is paying attention to the energy, she's softening all the scream just by bringing us all into the room. Maybe it won't be such a voluminous activity as much as an integration. Where does that land for you?
So I'm feeling very like touched by your 5-year-old part. Yeah. And that desperation. Yeah. Yeah. And my 5-year-old part used to love going out front and playing in the cul-de-sac with all the neighborhood kids. And we would just like hang out in gutters and like spray each other with water. And like, it was just, so the other day I found myself hosing off my back patio, and I went, and then I started hose. So I'm so resonating with like, primal screams can have that different like emotional tone or quality to like what they have to say and how they want to say it. And I think that mine is about like, I want to
Yes.
play, like I want to have
Yes.
fun. I want to be silly. And so it does feel like removing alcohol is like coming back to this like high school self that was so ready to like be cool and be an
Right.
adult and is like, hey, like where did you learn those messages from about like what coolness is? And like you've done your work, and now can we bring back some of these younger parts that were so giddy at life and just like cackled all the time and had belly laughs and yeah, like felt the textures of everything around her. And so maybe my scream's a little bit more like, to quote a childhood cartoon, like happy, happy, joy, joy, like just so much fun. Yeah.
I love this little piece of our conversation because I just as I've been doing these interviews, I'm learning so much from each person and starting each one now with, what does primal scream mean to you? And every person has a different and giddiness came through as one of the rising energies that I could completely relate to. I recently sat with grandmother since you and I last spoke, I think, and one of the clear messages from that experience was, I am a fully competent 3-year-old now.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
are.
I am, like, a
Absolutely.
reclamation of
Yeah.
my innocence,
Yeah.
meeting up with my wisdom, my experience now. I am in this really joyful, playful, excited to be here, curious state of being. Whereas the initial earlier screams were, pay attention to me. Now
Yeah.
it's squeal, and
Yep.
this beauty of working with ChatGPT when I was first dreaming about this primal scream thread that I wanted to pull on from every person I talked to was I said, is the primal scream an awakening moment, a cosmic awakening moment to our primal song? What we came here
Mm.
to sing. It's in the beginning, it's raw and it's rough and it's unlanguaged and it doesn't have form. It just has uh, volume and energy.
Yeah.
And as we become a little kinder to ourselves and more present to our nervous system as our GPS, as our finding our ease of beingness in all of our choices and boundaried awareness, right?
Mm.
That you go from this place of feeling your own light, your own lightness in the world, your own ease of beingness in the world, and that light becomes a little more focused, a little more to the point now where I feel like I'm living in this tuning of this laser beam of energy that I get to be in the world. It's my one, I think it's a Carl Jung quote that we should be so blessed to live as a bright star, you know, shooting across the sky and into the depths of space, that's what it feels like now, that the primal scream has become a primal song that
Mhm. Yes.
I'm here to sing. And I see that for you as well, that you've done
Yeah.
your good work to now show up fully ready to take it on. Yep, there's still more parts that need to be found and teased out of the
Mhm.
fear and teased out of the numbness. And
Yeah.
there's still I know there's some observers back here like, dude, can we really trust her? Is she really the
Mhm.
adult on board that she was screaming for as a child? Where are
Yeah.
the grown-ups? Right here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
I'm gonna ask you to put on your newly minted post dissertation what's the dissertation wisdom keeper that you are now, and say, well, how do we meet the collective primal screams that's rising on this planet right now? I love that you're moving towards social justice, because that's so speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for bringing this forward, because it's been buzzing here. There's so much to say, but I think, when you're talking about that, like, honing of this laser beam of just like energy, right? And like, how can I just take away any film that might be in the way of this just, shining its brightest. So like a core belief that I'm working from is that every single human being is birthed with this innate desire and capacity to flourish.
Yeah.
And I so feel that, like, personally, and then I've witnessed it over and over and over. And I think one of the biggest lies that we're told is that people are lazy. That people want to, people are lazy. I think that as like one of the core themes that I show up, that is so weaponized against every single marginalized identity. And I just think that is absolute bullshit. There's a great article I read at the beginning of the pandemic called "What If Laziness Doesn't Exist?" And I went, oh, well, shit, that changes everything. And I've continued to just like, this is this theme that I see. And I'm like, if
You might add that,
if
what
this,
if depression and anxiety are not an illness, but a messenger, right? It falls
right,
in that same category of how we judge people's reactions to an unsafe world, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
yep,
Thank you.
yeah. Yeah. And so one of the things that I've started to work with when I'm working with clients and with myself is starting to dream the dream, even if it's not possible yet. Right. So, like, I mean, evidence-based science here, like when you are working with someone to update some kind of habit, like you don't want to remove things in the beginning. You just want to start adding in like those positive rewards, right? So that like our bodies and our minds and our spirit get to become attuned and accustomed to like, oh, this could feel good. Like I don't need to go in with this sense of deprivation. Like I need to cut out these foods, or I need to not do this thing anymore that was actually bringing me a lot of comfort. Like we start adding in more things, and then eventually we can start having those
It
fall
reminds me
away.
of that scene in Indiana Jones where he's about to lift this thing up and he's got to have an equal bag of sand to put in its place.
Exactly.
Yes. Atomic Habits, Stacking Habits, that great book speaks exactly to what you're saying. Don't try and change completely overnight. Just notice where you have a pattern of self-betrayal in some way, and then stack a habit around that prevents you from being in that rut. Like back up 3 steps and notice, when I get up in the morning, I go and I do and I do and I do, and I forget to do this thing. So you've got to have a habit the night before, setting out your running shoes and your clothes, and so that so what are the habits?
Yeah. Well, I think, and so, I look at those habits as safety mechanisms, of like, what are ways that you have kept yourself safe? Like whether that was interpersonally or because your body is being policed, or because of discrimination, racism. And so like, for me, it's acknowledging what it was serving and then having compassion for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also looking to, most folks that I work with have this belief that it's something internal. And it's like, oh, like, no, you aren't broken in the least. Like, you are a survivor, like, of all the things that are happening in the world, and you are
Yeah.
here. You are
Right.
strong. And so you can start to externalize and look at the systems that we're living in that can also provide so much relief for someone to come into contact with like their inherent
Yeah.
dignity. It's like, you're not broken, the
That's
systems
right.
are. And so it's having compassion, and then it's also starting to imagine like what is possible. Yeah. Yeah. If this thing wasn't in the way, and I know it's so scary to think about, if that thing wasn't there, like what could I actually do? And that's frightening. So that's a whole bunch of work in its own to like sit with the possibility of just how bright you can
Yeah.
shine. And then a lot of my work takes place outside of the counseling room. So I identify as a social justice counselor, which means that with my privilege, that once the 50-minute session is done, I continue to work. So I am looking for resources. I am educating myself on what are the laws around here. I am networking as much as I can. So that's like what I've learned in my last 2 years. I've been doing work with a nonviolence agency, and there's a legal team, there's a housing team. Like it is absolutely phenomenal. So I am like, okay, how can we do this? Because we can't look at a person who is being pressurized by systems and say, work
No.
harder. No, that's not
No.
the answer. That is not the answer at
No.
all. And so for me, social justice is when I can, how can I start to take those systems and just like pry them open just a little bit? So there's a little bit more space for them to feel resourced and resourced in the way of like, can I give them a little bit more regulation within their nervous system so that they can dare to dream?
Courtney, so brilliant. About 4 years ago, I kept leaning into imagination. Like, imagination isn't a flight of fancy. It
Mm-mm.
is a quantum engineering skill that our imagination creates our reality. And the whole lens of perception was, I got that piece earlier on where, change your lens of perception, change your reality. This was a step further. This was recognizing that this mind that we have is so brilliant. It's so incredibly brilliant. But when we lose our innocence through abuse, through trauma, direct, indirect, big T, little t, it chills away at our intact imagination, our childlike wonder imagination. And that it has been my life's work to keep trusting my imagination, trusting. And I had 3 different therapists sit me down and say, I'm a little worried about you. Because you're leaning in so far to this new story and possibilities, and you're not being realistic. And it was like, no, I'm not acting from a wounded imagination. I'm acting from an intact imagination. And that if we could help, as you expressed just a moment ago, help people just open up the system enough for them to see that they are not broken, that we're existing in a very corrupted, very distorted, very self-perpetuating cycle of violence and mistrust and cynicism. And my Joji experiment that I went on the road and I measured hope, and we had big conversations about cynicism and pessimism and the theft of our human experience that creates, that we operate every day with armor instead of curiosity, with anger instead of understanding, and it takes an intact imagination, and intact is if losing our imagination is a death by 1,000 cuts, this is healing by 1,000 choices to choose something better for ourselves, something that we all deserve something better than what's showing up in the world right now. I think of the great polarization that we're in. I spend a lot of time holding space for the understanding of why we have to go so far apart in our belief systems. I think of the political strife that we're in right now, and even that it goes to a fist instead of seeing it as this is a expansion contraction movement that we're in right now, and that if you expand out far enough, you meet each other back in the circle, in the Horus, back full circle again, and that we meet each other in our disappointment. And you know, on a social justice, I recently spent some time with somebody who votes very differently than I do. And I said, I don't need to know who you're voting for. That part's already a given. Tell me what you're voting for. What is it that is driving your alignment with this person? And he says, well, I'm really worried about the education system, and I'm really worried about the healthcare system. And I just see us not getting any better with what we have now. I think it needs a big disruption. And I said, okay, I can meet you in your concerns about these things. I have concerns about how we grow food and how we have housing and energy, all the human infrastructure stuff that puts us in the state of survival rather than feeling like we're thriving as a species. We're just surviving as a species, and many are being crushed under the weight of that system. And we were able to meet and have real meaningful conversations about, yes, things have to change. It's how we go about that change. Do we do it with blaming and shaming and coercion, or do we do the work to elevate this conversation? And that's where I see you.
Yeah. And that's the, you know, that intention that I do my best to live by every day. And sometimes I do it. And when I'm not resourced, it's harder, right? To instead of doing like this finger point, right? In this. And it reminds me of, I'm totally forgetting where I learned this, but have you heard of the just like me practice?
No, say more.
Yes. So it's exactly what you were doing. It's acknowledging that like we all suffer. And the sources of suffering are different, and how that lands and how we're able to overcome them, that's different based on where our social locations land between marginalized and privileged. And one of the ways to work with this like extreme opposition is to look at someone, and you can imagine them as a 2-year-old, which is sometimes helpful.
I track their innocence. That's what I'm trying to meet. My innocence meets your innocence. Let's have that conversation.
Yeah. And so the prompt of just like me can be really centering, of like, oh, just like me, this person wants to reevaluate the systems that are educating, you know, the future generations. And just like me, they want a better world for their grandkiddos, you know. And so a really fun one to practice is like when you're on an airplane and maybe someone's taking a little bit longer to get to their seat, or they're trying to like shove
which should have been checked.
Exactly. And so that's one of those where you like, just like me, this person, you know, wants to make sure their luggage goes with them. Just like me, this person really wants to get into their seat, you know, and get comfortable and stuff. And so it's just one of those like simple little mantras that can start to build that muscle of like compassion. And for me, it looks like that open palm instead, you know, because it's so easy when we're indoctrinated all around us with like, they're bad, they're wrong, like you need to be good. Like that can show up and really put up this wall when we're trying to have conversation and we're trying to come into connection. And for me, because I've done this like deep dive course in the last 3 years of my eyes being open to exactly what's going on in the world, and that was because I hold so much privilege, you know, for me, I have this habitual tendency to be like, great, now let's fix it all. That's my whiteness coming online. Let's just fix it. And it's like, hold on, like we need to come into contact with the suffering, right? So that the defenses aren't being put up, but it's like, how are you also suffering? How can we work together? Because it's liberation for all. It's not just liberation for a certain few. It's really has to be all, including the
Right.
billionaires.
Oh, everybody. If we
Yeah.
cannot navigate to a place of grace for all that has come before, all that is in the present moment, and all that we will still have to navigate through to heal the human condition. If we cannot find grace for every aspect of it, every human that played a part in it, what we would label good or bad, we will never get
Right.
to the desired outcome. We just won't, because we will still be looking for the person to blame and shame. And then the gamesmanship, that's what the political discourse is about, the gamesmanship of it's the hypocrisy and the yes buts and the what abouts and what aboutisms. Well, we will die on this planet as a species trying to one up each other about who is to blame here. It's a beautiful step above it all to be in observer mode of the whole human condition, for us to find the grace for all of it. And
and that is why, like, my current manifestation of Primal Scream, like, I'm so glad that we're talking today, because this cycle I'm finding myself in of like go go go, like that doesn't serve this, like, the greater good. And it's so easy for me to get really scared to like ask for help, because this like meritocracy system that I've grown up with, it's so insidious. It comes in and it's like, if you just work harder, or like you're being lazy, or you're not setting yourself up for success. And it's like, to like actually like stop that and be like, I need rest. And from rest, I will be able to be attuned to myself, to come into a place of love, so I can have these conversations, and this, and it is so, it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to be soft.
Well, and so we're rebalancing from the toxic masculine, the patriarchal zeitgeist that we've been existing in. And I too had a heavy, I've been healing my toxic masculine. I had a heavy collusion with patriarchy, my privilege as well as a white woman and surviving. And so it's this leaning more and more into the intuitive, flow-based, feminine trust. And it's every time that I find myself getting at that edge of it's not enough, my whole nervous system dysregulates.
Yeah.
And I realize, having spent enough time in a well-regulated nervous system now, which felt foreign in the beginning, but I did reach a tipping point where it became my default mode network, that now when I find myself in a dysregulated state, I'm like, oh, I remember this. This is not where I want to spend my time. And I know I have my resources and my tools to bring me back into a grounded. Just last week, I was completely spun out. It took me 5 days to regulate again. And I knew that I would get through it. I didn't get lost in it as I once did. I know how to navigate out of those dysregulated places. And that dysregulation has to do with trying to perform in towards what I want for my life and the life for others that I want to be a part of through the old lens. And so it's a constant recalibration. And the beauty of somatics, and I don't have nearly I just have my own personal experience with it, but there is a body of work, a scientific understanding now of how our somatic wisdom is the path home.
Yep.
So if the primal scream is part of that somatic wisdom, we should be engaging it, encouraging it, supporting it. helping people not run away from it. Recognize that that first primal scream, that first one that you finally allow yourself, you set a boundary with somebody and you say, enough, I'm not going to do this anymore. And you break the bonds of codependency with your parents or the structures around you that have kept you so fear-based in your story. Once you break through that first threshold of primal scream, there's no going back. There's a before and afterness to one's life when you recognize that threshold for what it is. It's that recalibration to your own truth, and you are not dependent on anything out there for this wisdom. It's all right here. Yeah. Oh, Courtney, so excited for your generation and the Zers. The Zers are just jumping through. I heard something the other day that struck me. It turns out I'm not a boomer. I never felt like a boomer. I'm a Joneser. Do you know?
I haven't.
Okay, so between 1955 and 65, there's this subset. They're not quite Xers. They're not boomers. There's this middle ground, and our influences were the death of JFK, the assassination of JFK, Martin Luther King, Bobby Kennedy, the anti-war movement, Vietnam War, the psychedelics were just starting to come online. So we have this really interesting, and our thing was to keep up with the Joneses. That was our
fascinating
little sort of encapsulation. So boomers, most of the traditionalists have Alzheimer's now. We're done with them. The boomers have a lot of power still, too much. But that's slowly waning. So the Jonesers were kind of in the middle here. And I feel like we're tour guides for the next few generations to encourage you, to support you, to give your voice more presence in the world. The Xers, the millennials, the Zers, those are the ones coming online to vote right now. And then the alphas are right behind them. Those are all the little ones right now. And somebody called them the other day honey badgers. Isn't that a perfect description? They have intact imaginations because they've been brought online through the Xers and millennials. Like the zeitgeist has shifted enough now that we've got a lot of young people like, this is not okay, and we're not going, you're killing the planet, and we have to live on they're taking stewardship of the future in a way that my generation was completely unconscious to, because we didn't have the fear of our existential death on this planet like the younger generations are.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about, your younger self and my younger self that saw what was going on and said, hold on. No,
this is not a...
Yeah. And, I think this is why, becoming an adult and being empowered to do your own healing is so vital, is hopefully there's a lot of adults around those kiddos right now who are saying, stop, and we're able to listen, and not only listen, but we're able to advocate.
Right.
Yeah. You be a kiddo. Let me go fix this. Thank you for the heads up.
And engaging their intact imaginations in the solutioning of what's coming next. Yeah. It's when I was a little girl, when I was screaming at the world, I just remember being fixated on 2020. I didn't understand why. You would have thought 2000, Y2K would be the big thing. Where will you be at the turn of the century? How old will you be? Well, that wasn't at all interesting to me. What was interesting to me was how old would I be in 2020? And I was 62 in 2020. And that's not an exciting year. That's not a big calendar year. It meant nothing, but I understood that 2020 was going to be a huge moment in our human story. And I think COVID was such a distinct leveling event across the planet. And about 4 years before COVID came on, I had this big hit, this download that it would require multiple leveling events before we as a species would come into self-awareness, that we are the authors of our own misery, that the system is broken and that we are the keepers of that system. And if we are willing to do the work to calibrate our systems to our nervous system, instead of trying to have our nervous systems adapt to these dysfunctional systems, that would be the flip of the switch. And I want to get this on record today, because the hit is getting really loud right now. I feel the collective scream is coming forward in a big way. We're heading for another leveling event. We did not do well with the first one. Societies often go into denial at moments like that. It isn't that bad. It's not going to be that bad. Oh my God, 30 million people later died from the pandemic. I mean, it was a lot of people suffered, not so much from the disease, but from our lack of calibration to do the right thing for each other in the face of that disease. And I think of climate change as a slow moving leveling event, but it's accelerating right now. Where the leading indicators, which is my whole first 30 years of my career, was focusing on what are the leading indicators of shift in an organization. And we're in the middle of some big leveling events right now. On the plus side, cannabis is being descheduled from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. It's about fucking time. And that, I think, is going to begin to open the door on this conversation about the war on drugs and the failure. People have been using drugs to escape a broken system, beginning of time, and to expand their consciousness. And in that realm, the Church of the Eagle and the Condor, the Native American church, just won its court case against the United States government and established itself as a church of ayahuasca as a primary sacrament for their worship. So it isn't just Christians who get to have freedom of religion. It's the Church of Ayahuasca gets to have freedom of religion. So those feel like leveling events. This country that will have, because we've held other countries to the war against drugs, even though they wanted to legalize much sooner than we did. So that's a thing. But also this week, the seas are rising faster than they ever imagined they would. Their islands are already disappearing. The polar ice caps are melting at a rate that we did not expect this quickly. So there's these leveling events are, and it'll be something breath related, because breath is the closest we come to recognizing our mortality. So it's time. We are the ones we've been waiting for, and we're not waiting any longer.
Yeah.
And I see the whole economic system, energy, moving from consumptive, destructive technologies to regenerative and healing technologies. So I think you're right on time in your life, on time for society to embrace somatics and social justice and nervous system conversations and plant medicines. And here we are.
Here we are.
So what are you most excited about right now in your life? Maybe that's the primal scream that wants to go.
I'm going to Maui in a couple of weeks.
Yes. And
I've never
never been there.
Never been. And so I've been in Colorado the last 3 years, and I get to travel a lot, and I really like Colorado. And like, I'm a Northern California baby. And so like the ocean has always been right there. So I am excited to just sit on the edge of the ocean and breathe with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And oh, to be surrounded by green and warmth
Lush.
and yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I'm very, very excited for
Yeah.
that.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Well,
Yeah.
you deserve it.
Yeah.
You worked hard, and now you get to play fully
Yeah.
in your life. May it be so.
Yeah. My life depends on it.
Boy, ain't that the truth, right? And we're here to create a life we want to consent to. Yeah.
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 Yes.
To fully
Absolutely.
consent to the
Yeah.
human experience is to create a life you want to consent to. And that's
Yeah.
been my work. My nervous system has been pointing me towards that full consent to the human experience since I was a child. So even
Yeah.
though I'm a bit older than you, I'm right on time in my life. And that's what we need to share with everybody is you're right on time. Nobody's ahead, nobody's behind. We're all
Mhm.
here right now, and that's all that matters.
Yeah. And let's have some urgency here.
That's another piece of this conversation to be continued, right? There is that feeling of urgency that can be dysregulating or it can be energizing. And for me, it's become energizing. So many people talk, I'm surrendering. And it's like, well, no, I'm engaging. You know, like that edge between surrender and engagement is fear to love. Like I'm rolling up my sleeves. We're all first responders on the scene of a great mass awakening. Everybody's going to wake up dysregulated, 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds tantruming because that's where they disconnected from their innocence. It's going to take a whole bunch of us just holding space for that healing to happen. And we know what it's like having been through it ourselves. We can be wounded healers and help walk each other home.
Yeah.
May it be so. Mwah. Love you, girl. Thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for the Primal Scream podcast. We appreciate your willingness to sit in the pain and exploration of a fellow human. It is our hope that you found a thread that you can weave into your own story going forward. There is great beauty on the other side of the primal scream. A wise elder once said, "We are the ones we've been waiting for." And we are not waiting any longer for someone or something to shift the human story from fear to love. It's on us to redeem ourselves from our individual and collective unconsciousness, to find our ease of beingness. The future belongs to those who show up. We'll leave you with the song Like the Children Do by Meredith McHenry. She reminds us that the way home is the path of innocence reclaimed. See you on the next podcast. Have a beautiful day.
Put down your armor, I'll put mine down too. We'll do like the children know how to do. Caused you. We'll pour it all out like the children do. Don't get me wrong, you can't walk over me, but I'm strong enough to hold you when you're weak. I know I fucked up and you sure have too. So let's just start over like children do. Can we just go back to the time before our innocence was stolen? I don't know how to get us there, but I'll keep hoping. I'll keep hoping to do like the children do. We can do like the children do. I'll open my bleeding heart to you. Let's just pretend for a minute or two that our hearts can bend without shattering through. We'll find that forgiveness as if we're brand new. And you'll walk through the fire like it can't burn you. Can we just go back to the time before our innocence was stolen? I don't know how to get us there, but I'll keep trying. I'll keep trying to do like the children do. We can do like the children do. I'll open my filthy hands to you. Can't we do like the children do? Can't we do like the children do? 'Cause I don't want to say